When most people imagine an angel, they picture a beautiful human figure dressed in white robes, with large feathered wings and a peaceful expression. This image has become so familiar through centuries of art, literature, and popular culture that many assume it comes directly from the Bible itself. Yet when we examine the biblical texts, a surprising and often unsettling picture begins to emerge. Many of the angels described in Scripture look nothing like the serene-winged humans that appear in paintings, churches, and modern media. In fact, some biblical angels are among the strangest and most awe-inspiring creatures ever described in religious literature. To understand why, we first need to recognize that the Bible does not describe a single type of angel. Instead, it presents a hierarchy of heavenly beings, each with different appearances, responsibilities, and symbolic meanings. Some angels appear almost human and can move among people without immediately revealing their supernatural nature. Others are so overwhelming and otherworldly that witnesses collapse in fear the moment they encounter them. One of the most famous examples appears in the visions of the prophet Ezekiel, whose descriptions have fascinated theologians and historians for centuries. According to the text, Ezekiel witnessed extraordinary beings associated with the throne of God, creatures unlike anything found in ordinary human experience. These beings possessed multiple faces, including those of a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, all existing simultaneously on a single creature. Their bodies were accompanied by immense wheels covered with eyes, and wherever the creatures moved, the wheels moved with them in perfect unity. The imagery is so unusual that readers throughout history have struggled to determine whether it should be understood literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between. These beings are commonly identified as cherubim, a class of heavenly entities that serve in close proximity to the divine presence. Modern art often portrays cherubs as small winged children, but the biblical descriptions are dramatically different and far more intimidating. Far from resembling infants, the cherubim described in Scripture appear as majestic guardians associated with power, holiness, and divine authority. Another remarkable category of heavenly beings appears in the book of Isaiah, where the prophet describes creatures known as seraphim. These beings are said to possess 6 wings, using 2 to cover their faces, 2 to cover their feet, and 2 for flight. As they surround the throne of God, they continually proclaim divine holiness in a scene intended to communicate overwhelming majesty and reverence. Even more striking than their appearance is the reaction they provoke, as Isaiah immediately becomes aware of his own insignificance in the presence of the divine. Throughout Scripture, encounters with angels often begin with fear rather than comfort. One of the most repeated phrases spoken by angels in the Bible is some variation of "do not be afraid." This detail is revealing, because such reassurance would hardly be necessary if these beings consistently appeared as gentle figures resembling ordinary humans. Again and again, biblical accounts describe people reacting with terror, confusion, amazement, or profound awe when confronted by heavenly messengers. Even angels who appear in human form often possess a presence so extraordinary that observers immediately realize they are encountering something beyond the natural world. The Bible also presents angels not merely as messengers, but as participants in cosmic events that connect heaven and earth. They announce births, deliver warnings, guide prophets, execute divine judgments, and serve as symbols of God's interaction with humanity. Because of these varied roles, biblical descriptions often emphasize function and symbolism rather than providing the detailed physical portraits modern readers might expect. As a result, different passages describe heavenly beings using imagery intended to communicate power, wisdom, vigilance, holiness, and divine mystery. Perhaps this is why the most memorable angelic visions seem so strange to modern audiences. The purpose of these descriptions may not have been to create realistic portraits, but to express realities that transcend ordinary human language. How does one describe a being that belongs to a realm entirely beyond human experience? Ancient writers often relied on symbolism, combining familiar images in extraordinary ways to convey something fundamentally supernatural. This helps explain why angels in Scripture can appear both deeply familiar and profoundly alien at the same time. Over the centuries, artists gradually simplified these complex descriptions into the winged human figures that became dominant throughout Western culture. While these artistic traditions created some of history's most beautiful works of art, they also shaped popular assumptions about angels that differ significantly from many biblical accounts. The real angelic beings described in Scripture are often stranger, more mysterious, and far more difficult to categorize than most people realize. Rather than existing as decorative figures in the background of religious stories, they appear as powerful symbols of a reality beyond ordinary human understanding. In future episodes, we will explore the cherubim, the seraphim, the mysterious Ophanim or wheels within wheels, the archangels, and the development of angelic imagery throughout history. We will also examine how ancient Jewish and Christian traditions interpreted these beings, and why their descriptions continue to fascinate believers, artists, and scholars alike. Because the deeper we look into the biblical accounts, the more we discover that angels were never intended to be ordinary. They were meant to inspire wonder, humility, and awe before mysteries that lie beyond the limits of human imagination.